Happy Friday, all you wonderful seventh graders out there. I hope this week has been going all right for you and you've been able to, get back into those mathematical thinkings and hopefully everything else has been going all right for your other classes too. I know it's a little lonely here at the school, but this is our best option. So again, welcome back to Mathematical Beach, right? Where today we're going to learn something just a little bit new. We've been talking about, you've been working with percentages and changing from percent increase to decrease. Today we're going to go over a more specific application of that, namely sales tax and how that stuff gets used. So just to bring that up here a little bit, I'm just going to go through a few things with you. Here we're going to be talking about sales tax today. What it is, how do we calculate that in dollars, and how do we calculate it as a percent? All right, so some of you guys are maybe aware of what sales tax is. A sales tax is just like any tax. The government builds roads and makes schools, provides things like that. And kind of provides a lot of other stuff. That's how they pay for the Army. That's how they pay for, that's how NASA gets paid for as well. There are also other funds and things like that. But a lot of things that the government does is through taxes. And there are different types of taxes depending upon whenever you buy things. Even when you have a job and you make money, you have an income tax. So there's all kinds of different things. We're just going to talk today about the most common one that you'll run into in your life, and that is sales tax. So whenever you buy anything, a portion of the money that you pay goes to the government, like I said, to pay for all kinds of different things that the government's kind of in charge of. And so here on the screen, I just kind of found this screenshot. There might be some changes here, but this just shows some different sales taxes across the different states. Some of the states actually have a 0% sales tax. There is still a federal tax, right? So there are the states have their own tax, and then the federal government too does theirs. So they still have some taxes. But here in Minnesota, notice ours is at 6.875%, kind of a complicated percentage. There are lots of decimal points, which is one of the higher ones. But that's just life of where we live and how that stuff kind of goes. But how do we use this sales tax? What does it do? How does it, change things a little bit when you're going to the store and buying something? Because a lot of you guys have maybe run into that where you go to buy something and you get to the counter and all of a sudden when they ring it up, it's more than what it showed on the package, or, you're paying more than what the package said, which is a little bit interesting. And that's because of sales tax and how that gets calculated. And we use percentages to do that, right? So here's a little example, right? Maybe I'm going to go and I'm going to buy some cheese, right? Because I like cheese. Tastes good, especially if you melt it on some nachos. That's pretty awesome, right? But here, so we're going to use our Minnesota sales tax of 6.875%, right? And this thing of cheese costs $5.40, right? So how we're going to do this here, how we would calculate our sales tax is much like we would do any percent increase. That's how we can kind of think about this. We would think about our sales tax as a percent increase. It's going to go up. So there are two different ways we can go about this. I'm like, you can do it either way, right? They're both absolutely correct. So we're going to use either one of these numbers, right? One way is where we take this, here, let me pull up this drawing tool, where we've taken this percentage and we're going to, whoops, let me erase that for a second. That's not the right spot. We want to change the percentage to a decimal, which I've kind of already done, and you guys have gotten good at that. We change percent to a decimal again. Percent, per means divide, cents 100, divide by 100. So here we would move the decimal place over 2 spots, and then we'd put our extra 0 there. So we'd have 0.06875. That's the decimal number. And if we were changing that to percent increase, which you guys were doing earlier this week, we would add 1 to that because it's going to make the price go up, right? So with 1.06875, that would be our multiplier if we were talking about this in the context of percent increase, right? But We're not quite talking about that in the context of percent increase, but we can use that. So we're going to do two different ways here. Here's option number one, is we can calculate the sales tax amount and then add it back onto the original. That's a very common way that most people end up doing that, and it's perfectly fine. So in here, we would just kind of take our dollar amount, 540, and we take it times the whole big decimal value, and then we would add that back on. So in here, I would just take this 5.40 and multiply that through. So I'm going to grab my calculator here. Kind of disappears in the beach back there. But I would take my 5.4 times 0.06875, and then I just hit enter. And I don't know if that's going to, oh, no, it's not going to show up. It's going to disappear. So I'm just going to type it right onto here. The answer that we got, I got when I typed it in the calculator is 0.37125. Boy, lots of different decimals in that one. But here's the thing. It should be in dollars. It's actually some cents because there's no dollars there. So what we would do is we would just round that. Oh, not equal to. We'll just round it here a little bit to a couple of decimal places because we can't add on less than a penny, right? So we would just keep it down to those hundredths place or 2 decimal spots, which in this case would be 37. And then what we would do is we'd take our 540, our original amount, and add it to that 370 here, right? So that's what we would do. We would take this one here, this stuff, and add it to this one as well. And then we'd get our new amount, which in this case being our total, we would say is $5.77. That's what we would owe on there if we got a receipt. That's how much we would end up paying. And that's why it goes up a little bit, is because of that sales tax percentage that we end up adding back on, right? So that's option one. You can calculate the sales tax and then add it back onto the original. So that's one way to do that. Option number two, which we're going to go over, let me get rid of all this drawing on here. Option number two is to use it kind of like we would do percent increase, because that's all sales tax is. It's just a percent increase on a particular price. So here I've used the percent increase number, which is 1 point, yada, 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 yada. And we'll take that times 540. So again, I'm just grab my calculator. I'm going to type that in there. So I'd say 540 times 1.06875. Type all that in. And again, I'm just going to type that on there because probably doesn't show up on your guys' screen very well. So here I use the calculator and we get 5.77125 is what comes out of there, which is very, very close to what we had. Again, this is in dollars. We're going to have to round that 2 decimal places out to the pennies, things like that. Companies, oh man, they want to have it all the way up. They want to keep as much as they can. You know, the rest of this isn't really going to matter. So we can kind of round that part off. Here we get $5.77, which is the exact same thing as if I hop back to option one. That's the exact same thing we figured out before, right? So you get the same result. No matter what, you'll get the same thing either way. So actually, that's kind of a nice thing. You don't have to use both ways, but actually, if you do use both of them, you can kind of check your own answer, right? If you get the same thing in both of them, it should be correct. If you got something different, something went off on there, right? That's a way for you to kind of self-check your work and kind of see on there, right? So that's how you calculate sales tax. Multiply it, add it back on, or kind of use the percent increase option. Now, another way too, this is a little less common, but we're still going to kind of go over that, is how could we calculate what was the sales tax percentage, right? That's what we're going to do on here. Here's kind of a sample receipt, and we're going to find what is the percent sales tax that was paid on this particular bill, right? And again, there are 2 ways. Just like there were 2 ways to calculate the money for sales tax, there's 2 ways to calculate the percentage for sales tax. Either one is perfectly fine. It doesn't matter which one you use. So we're going to go over option one. All right, and we're going to use a little bit of division. Okay, we can use this idea with these amounts, right? We have our total and then our taxes being added together, and they added that and got this amount. So this is kind of reflecting on our option one from back here, because we just took our amount times this percentage and then added it back onto the total. So since we were multiplying here and we're going, backwards and finding percentage now, we need to divide. So we would take our tax divided by the subtotal to get the percentage, right? So in this case here, again, I would just grab my calculator, type that in, 6.66 divided by 60.43. And I see, boy, big long string of decimals on here. So I'm going to type in some of that stuff. It'll take me just a second here. 110210161. Man, it feels like I'm playing a video game right now. It's pretty awesome. But on here, now the thing we have to keep in mind is this is as a decimal, not as a percentage. Your calculator won't give you an answer as a percentage. We got to use our brains in order to do that. So here, again, to change something into a decimal value, what we have to do is from a decimal to a percentage, is we have to move this over 2 spaces and then put that in there. So in this case here, I know that what we should have is 11.0210116%. Now, do we have to keep all those extra decimals? Not at all. When you're doing a sales tax percentage, it's usually a good idea to keep about 2 decimal places after that. So really, if I were going to put this one down, I'd put 11.02% because that works out a little bit nicer, right? So that's option 1. Just divide the taxes by the subtotal. That's one option that you have. And that's reflecting basically what we did here in our first option on this one, right? We did that. And so we're just using that, finding that percentage straight away. And all right, let me erase some of this stuff here. We're going to try a second option. And that second option is to use the total versus the subtotal. And this, we just divide them right away. And this is a reflection on our option 2 from before, where we're thinking about it as percent increase. So here, if we were to divide these 2 things out, so here I'm just going to type it in, taking the total divided by the subtotal to see, what's the percent increase essentially on that. So 67.09 divided by 60.43. I just typed it in my calculator. And again, I get a big long decimal out of here. So I'm going to type that whole thing in, 1.1102101161. Now notice, hey, this here is pretty darn similar to, if we hop back up a step, to exactly what we had here. It just has an extra 1 in front of it. And that's because in this method, you'd be finding the multiplier, and we got to convert that like, oh, this was a percent increase. So really on here, what would we would be looking at is just this back portion, right? We would ignore this because we know it's a percent increase, and then we'd change this to our percentage. And again, if I were writing that out, I'd move the decimal place over 2 spots, round it a couple decimal places, and say it's 11.2%, which is exactly the same thing as we found back here, right? Even overlaid, bam, it's right there. So that's how you can calculate sales tax percentage if you just have the numerical values in there also. So hopefully you learned about some sales tax. Again, if you have more questions, or if this just isn't quite making sense for you, send me an email. I'll figure out a way so that it can make sense for you. All right. You guys have a good rest of your day and a fantastic and wonderful weekend. Hopefully the weather for you is just as nice as the weather has been for me. I mean, it is fantastic here. So I hope to see you later. You guys have a good weekend. I'll see you again on Monday.